So we just finished watching season 1 of Castle Rock, and we'll be right back with our spoilery thoughts.
That's right. And since this is going to be a spoiler discussion, this is the last warning that you'll get. As soon as our intro plays, we'll be right back to talk spoilers with you. If you haven't watched Castle Rock, watch it now. Come back to this later. If you have watched Castle Rock, get ready to talk spoilers. Hi folks, welcome back to Pop Up Fizzle. I'm Jeff.
I'm Heidi.
And we're here to talk about Castle Rock Season 1. This was a original series based on Stephen King's work from J.J. Abrams.
Mm-hmm.
And this was streaming on Hulu, so they dropped a new episode every Wednesday. I think they dropped the first 2 episodes first, and then every Wednesday after that.
Yeah, like actual TV, like coming out weekly.
Yeah,
not a whole
go figure.
Not a whole season dropped at once.
Not that we mind that.
No.
I went through Iron Fist Season 2 like that, so that happens. After we waited so long for Luke Cage, I was just like, forget it, I'm watching all of this.
And I still have yet to catch up on that.
But this dropped every Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
If you were a nerd like me, you waited up at 2 on Tuesday evening until 2 a.m.
Central Time.
At least where I am, Central Time, for when they would drop that Wednesday show, and then I would watch that immediately. We waited until we didn't want to do an episode by episode kind of thing, so we're just going to talk spoilers now. This is assuming that you've seen the entire series. First of all, let's just kind of give our overall thoughts about the series, and then we'll get into some specifics.
Okay, so I thought it was really well done. I thought it was really well acted. I really loved that it was an original story about Stephen King's playground of Castle Rock, where many of his books took place. So I liked that it was something new and interesting for that area, and not something that's based on a book, but just based on the crazy that is that fictional small town in Maine. So I thought that was really interesting. I really did like callbacks to books that have existed, different towns that were nearby that other things took place in. So I thought that was really well done. Really enjoyed the whole cast, so I can't say more about how much I liked it, but I probably will.
Yeah, I thought you did I thought you hit the nail on the head when you said playing in Stephen King's playground. This series was not something that felt like you needed to know a lot about Stephen King's stories to appreciate or understand this season of television. However, if you are a Stephen King reader, then there are going to be deeper, richer things for you to pull from it. Connections to things, either loose connections or strong connections. And so I think your knowledge of King, while not necessary, certainly does enrich the process. But I think they did a great job of making it to where if you don't read Stephen King, you're not familiar with those connections, you can still go in and enjoy this season for what it is.
Yeah.
I also agree with you that I felt like the performances were strong throughout this series, and we'll talk more about that as we get into specifics. Now, your experience with Stephen King is different than mine.
I've read several of his books. I've enjoyed several of the TV miniseries. I've kind of been disappointed with some of the movies, but I'm always really on board with a lot of what Stephen King has produced, at least his older stuff, like stuff that's come out in the last 10 years. I really haven't read or looked at even, but kind of his classic stuff like It, The Stand, The Shining. I've been there for that. I think starting in probably 7th or 8th grade, probably maybe even a little bit earlier for a couple of things, I was voraciously removing those books from the library and returning them just as quickly, just reading through as much King as I could find. So maybe some stuff wasn't available at my school library for, known reasons. Stephen King's not necessarily PG, so there were maybe some things that I missed, but I have read quite a few of his older things, probably from when his, up through maybe the 90s.
Yeah. Now, for me, I came to Stephen King a little bit later in my life. I did not read Stephen King growing up or in my teen years even. I did see, the miniseries and things like that because I was always interested in those kinds of things, but I didn't really read the books until I became an adult. And and even that I came to sort of as through circuitous route. I started reading Dean Koontz, and I appreciated Dean Koontz, especially the Odd Thomas series, and picked up some of his thrillers. And then I thought, Koontz and King kind of operate in the same circles. I should try Stephen King, and so I began to pick up some Stephen King books. I'm especially fond of Stephen King's short stories. I love those shorter bits of writing. And I like some of the more modern stuff. Even some of the things that other people don't seem to like Duma Key, I really liked a lot.
I really enjoyed that too.
Yeah, and so I think those are, that's my story. It came to it differently. I haven't read the classic stuff, and I certainly didn't read it in the context of the time frame that it was put out. This particular show, I did read something just after I watched the finale, which was the show creators talking about how they came to Stephen King's work when they were too young for it. That it was like their parents had left books laying around, and they had read it, and that and it sort of traumatized them. It was sort of a thing. So
Stephen
but
King
that was kind of their
traumatizing.
pull to it, that it was a kind of a forbidden thing, and so they it was a different experience for them. So I think that's interesting, an interesting connection. I really feel like you can feel J.J. Abrams' kind of hand in this, not because I don't think he was hands-on in the production process, but you can see kind of the aesthetic of, when J.J. Abrams does something that's set in a particular time period, he's done homages to Spielberg and to other things, and this feels very much like attention was paid to the surroundings and to accents and to just attitudes of certain areas and backgrounds of characters and stuff like that. And I feel like it felt like a real lived-in world as opposed to a big production, a big Hollywood thing. The town felt real; it felt lived in. The characters and the way that they interacted with each other, was very realistic. I think of Melanie Linsky's character Molly Strand, who had an interesting arc through this, but her connection to Jane Levy's character Jackie Torrance, that they were close, and Jackie was helping her with stuff, but they didn't seem like they were real friends, just like we know each other and she's offered to help, and that's such a real situation that you can know somebody and be friends with somebody in a certain way in a community that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the first person you think to call when something goes wrong or whatever. And so I feel like some of those relationships were handled well. Of course, the Jackie Torrance character is a nice reference to Jack Torrance from The Shining. She even goes into a little bit of that about how they're related, and that because he was such a disappointment and such a problem that she named herself, rechristened herself Jackie just to drive her parents crazy. Let's start with the main character, which is Henry Deaver.
Which one?
Yes. We'll get into that part of the story in a little bit. But we have Andre Holland as Henry Deaver. When we first meet him, we see him in a courtroom setting talking about life and the taking of life, and that, and they even kind of reiterate that in the finale, that he would need something sort of signed and sealed by God himself before he would be willing to do that. And we see that he's very passionate about the people that he's representing, including the woman that we see who goes to death row in that first episode, and his compassion for her and his attempt to save her life at the last minute. Even when something goes awry, which was a kind of a nod to the Green Mile, something doesn't go according to plan with the execution. That's a traumatizing event for him. Even before he gets the call that he needs to go and represent the kid, or that the kids ask for him. But I thought throughout the season, his acting was spot on and subtle in ways that it needed to be subtle.
He was a real person. He was
a real person, and we see him wear down throughout the season. One blow after another begins to take its toll on him. Until we see him in this finale making choices that in that first episode, just 9 episodes earlier, he would never have made. So I feel like that was a great arc for him. I thought he handled it so well. And there was a lot of a lot of trauma left over, a lot of residual trauma from his missing 5 days, and not remembering not remembering what had happened to him, and the fact that people looked at him as some sort of killer because of what had happened to his father. That sort of even though he has nothing to feel guilty for, that sort of hangs over him, this
like
this
a cloud.
shroud of
cloud.
and that follows him when he goes back into Castle Rock. That it's still there. That all these years later, it's still how they see him. He hasn't escaped that.
It's a small town, and people have long memories in small towns.
Yeah,
so.
And if you've never lived in a small town, I have. I've lived in a very small town.
I'm sorry.
Where people knew who I was my first week, because I was the only new guy that had moved into town. So this is not uncommon for small town America, that people know everything about you, and they know things that you'd rather them not know, because it's hard to keep a secret in a small town. And I thought all of that really played into this.
Yeah.
Even so far as Shawshank, the prison, was the only real employer in the community. That the community had seen better days. There wasn't a lot of work to be had unless you wanted to work in the prison. And because of that, a lot of the men that worked there resented having to work there and were awful.
Yeah.
The character played by Noel Fisher, Zalewski, the prison guard that first calls Henry to the prison, much to the chagrin of the warden and all the other people.
Yes.
But yeah, his character has just seen the brutality of the guards, and also I'm sure being around the prisoners is also damaging to your psyche. But yeah, so we see him sort of at the end of his rope too, even early on, struggling with the notion that I'm bringing a child into the world, and look at it. Look at what this place is. And
yes, and Castle Rock, is a place where bad things happen always.
Yeah, and everybody seems to understand that history. Everybody seems to have, there's an ongoing thing with Jackie Torrance, that she is sort of a chronicler of, or at least bears the knowledge of, a lot of the events that have happened in this town, which is also something we see in Matthew Deaver, Henry's father, that he's very well aware. When we listen to the tapes as the season progresses, we know that he's aware of all the evil things that have befallen Castle Rock, and he believes that they all originate in one place. And so they begin to build that out really early on, this notion that Castle Rock, bad things happen there.
And it wasn't me who did it, it's this place.
It's this place, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, the reason, of course, that Henry Deaver ends up back in Castle Rock is because we start the series, let me jump back to that. We start the series with Terry O'Quinn, who we remember as Locke from Lost fondly. Great character actor. He's been in a ton of different things. Awesome. I remember him from the 70s, watching the Stepfather horror movies, where he was the stepfather who kept killing his family.
I don't.
There was at least 3 of those, I think.
I didn't see those
with him in them. Yeah,
but I've enjoyed him in everything.
He had hair back then. He was a younger man. And he
wasn't always bald?
No.
With that mustache?
No.
No.
So Terry O'Quinn turns in a great performance here. He's only in a couple of episodes and a couple of flashback
couple
scenes.
Of minutes, yeah.
But he nails them. You feel for his character and get creeped out by his character in equal portions.
Yeah.
But he's a man who's committed to what he believes.
What he thinks is right.
That's right. And so we see him early on, and how kind and tender he is with his wife, and how normal everything seems, and then
suddenly.
and then we find out that he's got some pretty dark secrets, including the fact that he's stashed away the character they refer to as the Kid
in the subtitles.
In the subtitles and throughout the show. They really don't refer to him as anything throughout the show.
Yeah, I think it's...
Even when the warden comes in the last episode, she says, "Is he here?" And she goes, "Who?" And she said, you took him in when he left the prison." They don't say his name.
Never. Well, he never revealed his name.
Right.
Even to Henry, who was supposed to be his lawyer. You never got his name and he's your client?
Yeah.
Nope.
So, but anyway, the Kid, played wonderfully by Bill Skarsgård, who also played Pennywise in the recent incarnation of It, turns in a great performance here because you can buy that he's, you can look at his character in so many different ways, especially by the end of the show.
Yeah.
But even early on, is he creepy? Yes. Is he creepy because he's been damaged by being under the prison for all this time? Or is he creepy because he's evil? Or is he creepy because he's a victim of a kidnapping? Or is he, there's so many ways to look at his character. Mm-hmm. Is he making the things around him happen? Or is he just aware that they're happening because he's there and he feels the weight of that? There's so many issues at play. And I think he plays that part so subtly
that you can read into it so many different ways.
So when you see, so let's use episode 8, I think, for, if I'm thinking correctly, the episode that mainly follows Ruthie.
Yeah.
It may be the episode before that. I think it's episode 7. I think it's the episode before that.
Mm-hmm.
He seems so creepy when she's seeing him and interacting with him. Mm-hmm. But then they make that turn in episode 9 where you find out that he is Henry Deaver, or at least claims to be Henry Deaver from another timeline or another universe, another reality.
And so if you look back at
his performance through that lens, you see that what we took as creepy in the moment was really just him. He knows that she's ill. Mm-hmm. He knows that she has dementia and doesn't necessarily see things properly. And he's talking to her he's trying to keep her safe. He's doing things that he thinks will keep her safe. So when you see it through that different lens, his performance works both ways. The first time you through, it's creepy. And then when you see it through that lens, you're like, okay, well, that wasn't creepy. He knew where she got, X, Y, and Z because he was her son.
Right.
And he knew she had dementia because he was her son, and she was frightened and upset, and so he was trying to keep her calm.
Yeah.
Of course, all of that culminated, of course, in the accidental killing of Alan Pangborn, played wonderfully by Scott Glenn. We love Scott Glenn. We love him as Stick in Daredevil and Defenders, and I've loved him for years.
I think I've enjoyed his performances. I may not have necessarily known his name when I did see him, but I don't feel like I've ever seen him and felt like he was just phoning it in.
Yeah,
so
I just rewatched Quicksilver. Which is, it gets some flack from some people that love true westerns because it's kind of an 80s version of a western. It's very lighthearted and sort of action-y and adventure-y instead of straight up western. But I really enjoy him in that as well. He is great as Alan Pangborn. Now, Alan Pangborn is a character that is familiar to Stephen King readers, both from Needful Things and
The Dark Half, which is one of my absolute favorites from Stephen King. He was a very important character in that book as well. So Alan Pangborn, a staple of Castle Rock and the Castle Rock Police Department. So you kind of went around it a little bit, but episode 9 of Castle Rock was really, I felt, super pivotal to everything. Let me say, starting off, when they first found that kid in the basement and they asked him his name and he said Henry Matthew Deaver, I really thought he was saying that was his name. And then we were like, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, he must be calling for this guy because he's his lawyer and blah blah blah. And I'm like, but he was saying it like it was his name. And so when that episode came around, I was like, I knew it. Okay, good. So he was identifying himself, but also possibly, I would say he was like, acknowledging that he may not be the only one.
But now we also saw Terry O'Quinn's character saying to him, Henry Matthew Deaver. You got it?
Yeah, you call for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw that. But the thing is, he knew to call for him, but that was his name too.
Right.
So it was like, I really felt like he was identifying himself. And so it was really, it felt great to me to see to see episode 9 and follow his life up until the point where he wound up in the wrong world. He was a regular guy. He had been taking care of his mom. His mom was with the sheriff now somewhere. I can't remember if they moved away out of Castle Rock or not. They moved away from Castle Rock. And so he was married, looking to have a kid, just like a normal everyday life. And he got back to Castle Rock because something happened at home. Or his dad had died. Same parents as the Andre Holland, Henry Deaver, and it was just super trippy, but also really cool.
Now, we find out later in the last episode, we see him in the cemetery looking at the headstone for the Deaver baby, which we know is probably him in that reality, and that because he had died, because they had lost that child, they adopted the man that we know is Henry Deaver, played by Andre Holland. So there's that connection as well. We'll get more into the finale here in a minute because I think there's a lot to unpack there. But I also wanted to talk about Melanie Lynskey as Molly Strand. As we said earlier, she had this great sort of arc because of her connection, not only to Henry and to having pulled the plug on his dad, basically. Because she was aware of just how twisted and messed up he was, and that people were probably going to die if she didn't do something. Early on, we're not really sure how to take her character because she's abusing a lot of meds to try to keep the voices out and
a little weird,
visions
little kind of, somebody who, if you listen to them talk, you probably wouldn't want to. So, but she endears herself as soon as Henry comes to town because she really does still care about him, and she even though she wants to stay out of all the weirdness, she finds herself being pulled back into it because she cares for him. And then once she meets the kid, there's also an interesting thing there. Like, she willingly takes him into her house, and she tries to help him as best she can. Because they're friends.
Yeah, and then we find out, of course, once we see his version of the story and where he comes from, that he and Molly were friends and that he has this connection to her. And sadly, he watched her die. That episode, the way episode 8 ends with him saying, in the woods, that's where you died, or whatever, it's like, wait, what?
Wait, what?
And then we get to see in episode 9
from his perspective.
Yeah. But I thought her performance was solid because she was kind of mousy and kind of, a little off because of the meds and whatever. And then slowly, as she moved away from that, she was more stable. And then we get to see her in the end that she had a happier ending. She had moved away from Castle Rock, less affected by all the nonsense there, and building a life for herself, which is exactly what Henry had asked for her to do, to leave. I thought it was interesting that she ended up in the Keys. I wondered if there was going to be some sort of Duma Key reference, but
that'd be awesome. No,
but I didn't see anything there.
Didn't see it either.
The other standout for performance for me was Sissy Spacek in this. Of course, most of these actors and actresses had a connection to Stephen King properties before. Sissy Spacek being no exception to that. Her being the original Carrie.
Amazing.
And of course, she's a great actress. Anyway, she's turned in wonderful performances. Coal Miner's Daughter, which you've probably never seen, where she played Loretta Lynn. It's a great story and a powerful performance from her. She's been great and everything, and she doesn't do a lot of work these days. I know she's going to be in that new movie with Robert Redford, which looks like it'll be good. Old Man with a Gun, or I may be misremembering that title. We saw the trailer for it.
Oh yeah, the theater.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it seems like maybe she was semi-retired for a while, or being more choosy about roles and kind of just relaxing and taking it easy. Nice to see her turn in a performance here, and that she's going to be in that new film because she really is solid. She's good in this because her character of Ruth Deaver, Henry's mother, loves him so much that as a young man she sought to protect him from his father by prompting him to lie, tell your father what he wants to hear, which backfires on her and makes the dad trust her less, which becomes an issue. But we see her as an adult when Henry comes back to town, struggling with dementia, struggling with Alzheimer's, or is she? And that becomes a question that this series does not answer. And I read something from the showrunners who said, that's a very typical Stephen King sort of thing. Is it a supernatural thing? Is it a real world thing? We're not going to answer that question for her.
Yeah, but we can always speculate, and I really feel like what she presented, most people would say that she's presenting as suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia.
Right.
But very truly, you could also say that she was living in several different timelines, and just she needed to remember where she was a lot of the time, but she was, I was just gutted when we saw her shoot Alan, and then the very next thing that she had was him coming back to her after not being around for so long, and the first thing she says is, "Don't leave," and I was like, Oh my gosh.
Heartbreaking, yeah.
That's
well, and because he
awful.
had told that story to Henry as well, that
Yeah.
people had heard a gunshot at your mother's house.
Mm-hmm.
And they call me even though I'm not the sheriff anymore. I'm the first person they call. And
Yeah.
so I showed up, and the first thing she said to me was, "Don't leave." So we had gotten to hear that story already from him. We just didn't have the context.
No,
for it.
and it was just heartbreaking.
So that episode called "The Queen," in a reference to the chess pieces that she uses to remember, and she says that she places them around so that if she feels lost in another moment, that if she sees that piece, it'll pull her back. She'll remember that it's now. And so this notion of seeing that through her eyes, I loved that there were moments from earlier in the season that we didn't get, where it just seemed like she had wandered off,
or she was
and
being
we got
weird.
to see the context for them.
Yeah, she wasn't
in the
being
course
weird.
of that episode. She wasn't being weird. She was somewhere else experiencing something else, at least in her mind, if not in reality. And so yeah, it was an interesting mystery in and of itself that. She was either a woman suffering from dementia or she was a woman unstuck in time. That must be how dementia would feel. However, there were certainly things to insinuate that perhaps this was really happening to her. She says to Molly there in the finale, "You and I have had this conversation. You always say that." And it wasn't until she revealed something that she had never revealed before, because for Molly, all those things are actually starting to come together in her head. She's getting the bigger picture. It wasn't until she said something new that she said, "You've never said that before." And she's able to talk her down off the bridge.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
great episode.
Great episode. And so, so once we recognized what was happening in episode 9, where we felt, we were seeing things from the alternate Henry Deaver's perspective, his point of view, the evil things that were happening, they happened in his world when our Henry, played by young Andre Holland, I don't have the actor's name, it's further up in our wiki page here, when he wound up in their world. And the thing is, he wound up in their world for about 27 years.
Right.
But he remained a child in all that time. And so we heard, from Lacey, the character played by Terry O'Quinn, that, I saw you when Deaver, or somebody saw him in the trunk, and he...
It was Alan. It was Pangborn.
Pangborn, excuse me, sorry.
Over, yeah.
But pulled him over, saw him in the trunk, and saw that he had not aged a day, because he's been there for 27 years. And I'm like, man, Stephen King, you and your 27 years. Yeah. Always.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it was so interesting that, 11, 13-year-old Henry had been in that world, even though it was 9 days for us, or at least his original world, it was 27 years for that one. So this kid who's trying to get back, not a kid, probably about, I'd say he's about 27 himself, because why wouldn't he be? Because it's Stephen King, 27 seems to be his magic number, he's probably speculating, and now that he's heard more about, this world's Henry Deaver, that he was gone for 9 days, he's trying to get back, because it'll only be 9 days for him. But the thing is, evil things happen in his world when that Henry Deaver was there, and so evil things happen in this world because he's there, because he's not supposed to be here. So you can postulate that he's the devil, like Lacey said, or you can postulate because he's in the wrong place at the wrong time, that just the world is bending wrong around him and everything is happening wrong. Right. So
yeah, and that's what I think made the finale so brilliant, is that you could take it any number of ways. I saw a lot of people online that just didn't appreciate the ending because they thought it didn't answer anything. Oh. And I thought that was the point. The point is they want you to be smart enough not to expect them to spoon feed you an answer, but to speculate and to question what you just saw.
What happened?
Right. So there are different ways to look at this, as Heidi said. You can look at it that Henry Deaver, by the end of Castle Rock, by the end of the first season...
Which one?
The main Henry, the one that we followed throughout, not the kid. That he had changed, that hearing the noise, hearing the...
Oh, gosh, and all of that.
Yeah, had done something to him, and that's why he saw the kid as a monster there at the end.
Yeah.
And he became the very thing that he hated. He became a warden of one prisoner, even though he had spent his whole life trying to get people out of prison and trying to save their lives. He took someone's life by making a decision that wasn't his to make. Or you could see it as that the kid was the devil, and that everything he told Henry throughout the season, including that whole episode 9, was made up in an effort to get Henry to do what he wanted him to do. Or you could look at it that the kid was who he said he was. He was Henry Deaver from another place, but that being in that prison for 27 years in Castle Rock, where bad things happen to people, had made him something worse. There's so many ways to take that, and they don't want to give you that answer. They want you to decide where you land on that.
I love that so much, because it really makes you stop and think, and then really analyze each episode as you saw it. And I feel like this is something that definitely has rewatchability value as well. Now that we've seen all of the episodes, you can go back with that perspective, with that context, and look for things that weren't there before, and maybe even try to find a new answer or a new outcome or a new theory from being able to watch it over again now with the new information from the full series.
I feel like there's a tendency, and maybe it's just because we got a lot of views for our Hereditary spoiler discussion. And I think Hereditary is one of those things that is a little divisive for certain people, because I think that it's a movie that expects you to pay attention, and it expects you to be smart enough to put the pieces together. It trusts you as a watcher. It treats you with the respect of, I think they're going to be able to put this together. So I'm not going to tell them everything. I'm going to show them the pieces, and I'm going to let them assemble it. And however they assemble it will inform their opinion on this thing as a whole. I think Castle Rock very much does the same thing.
I agree.
Because, however, it's a series and not a 2-hour movie, it gets a lot more time to be more subtle and to play with things. We don't know, as Heidi said, whether his presence affected things there because he doesn't belong, he doesn't fit, which would also explain why he didn't age, because he doesn't belong there.
Right.
And then, so that's one explanation. The other explanation is that he's evil and he's making terrible things happen. And certainly early on, that's what they want you to feel.
Absolutely.
But then as we get to see him, his response to seeing the bad things that happen around him, at one point he stood up on top of a building and was going to end it.
Yeah. He didn't want to see that anymore.
Right. And so I think
assume.
Yeah. So there are so many ways to look at it, and they don't spell it out. They don't tell us whether Ruth was unstuck in time or whether she was just suffering from dementia. They don't tell us whether the kid was telling the truth or whether he wasn't. They don't tell us whether Henry was right to lock the kid back up or wasn't. They don't tell us those things, or what the sound actually was.
Yeah.
Now I think, and I'd have to go back and watch it, so don't take this as truth. This is just speculation. I believe that at one point, and I want to say that it was in episode 9, that when they're out there in the woods and he's seeing, like the girl who killed her family years ago and ate them or whatever, and then seeing all the other horrible things that have happened there, and it's like everything's kind of converging in that one space.
Yeah, and all the birds.
The birds, right? The umbration of birds.
Yeah.
Or murmuration. Sorry, is what I mean. But not umbration. I don't know what umbration is. I just made up a word. Umbration. Murmuration. Yeah. There's a part where he looks up at those birds. Or maybe Molly does, and the sun is like in the way, and it's almost like like something's blocking out the sun and it looks pointed, and I wondered if it was a subtle Dark Tower reference, that the tower is where all those things converge.
That's true, yeah.
And the way the birds were moving around, it was like something was in the way. So I could be making that up. Maybe I just imagined it. Maybe I wanted to see a Dark Tower reference in there.
But so going back to Stephen King and playing in his, playing in his playground.
In the multiverse.
So many of Stephen King's things have to do with alternate universes. What did you call them? Thinnies?
Yeah.
Okay, so places where the reality is much thinner and
that's
things.
The Dark Tower terminology for that.
Okay.
They're probably referred to as other things in other works. The TV show Haven, even though it was based on a short story that didn't really have
all those
those sort of
things.
supernatural things did in its later seasons deal with the notion of thinnies and stuff leading into our world. It's a very Stephen King concept.
Yeah, so I mean,
to play with.
In it, there was definitely some sort of transfer from another universe to ours. In The Dark Half, there was another sort of breaking up of a timeline of something that didn't belong. So it is very Stephen King to know that there's other universes or
and even the
multiverse.
character of Randall Flagg is
Yes.
not supposed to be from our universe.
No, but he appears in so many of Stephen King's
Right.
works, even
wearing
as
different faces, different names.
Right.
But he's the same character.
the same character every time.
Yeah.
So it is not unusual and very much
To be loved by anyone?
and very much expected. If we were to see some sort of dimensional crossing happening in a Stephen King inspired work like this. So, that convergence right there, seeing all the bad things that had happened in Castle Rock happening in that space was really cool to see. I actually really enjoyed that. I was like, yes, all the things that they mentioned.
I wanted to call out a couple of smaller character bits that were played well. I felt like the actor who played Matthew Deaver was appropriately creepy.
Yes.
And we saw him in moments of, where he seemed like a genuine father, and then he would say something so often ridiculous and just seem crazy. And then the further we got, the more we got to know him, both through his recordings and through seeing Henry's memories as they would come back.
Or Henry's.
Both Henrys. Or Ruth's, that we got this picture of him as being a really messed up guy.
Yeah.
So that was played with enough subtlety early on that we kind of questioned what was the truth about him. But the more we got to see, the more he dialed up the crazy, and I thought he handled that well. Rory Culkin has a small part in this as Willie. We don't get a lot of him, just mainly in one episode and then a little bit in the finale. Always interesting to see a Culkin brother getting work, but I thought he was fine in this as well. Noel Fisher is only in those first few episodes as the guard. Zalewski. He's really good in that, though. I really feel for his character early on.
Yeah, and just really, really interesting. We'd seen, now he was seeing stuff early on, just not seeing reality happening, and then finding that when he finally went off the deep end himself, that, where he saw all the things going wrong were all the places that he made things go wrong. So that was really interesting, a nice little symmetry there too.
Yeah.
So,
and in episode 4, The Box, Zalewski loses his mind, basically, and as Heidi said, and that episode ends in such a way where you're just kind of gutted because you feel so badly for him and what this place has done to him, and then he just dies, and so he's got a baby on the way and a wife expecting him to come home, and that's just ends his story in a terrible way. Now we do get to see him in the flashback for the kid as when he's remembering his time as Henry, that when he went to his dad's house and all of that. And finds the kid there. There's a moment where Zalewski's apparently a police officer.
Yeah,
in that reality.
So police officer, prison guard, sort of the same sort of track that he would have taken no matter what.
Yeah. So all of that was interesting, and some of those smaller performances. Even Jane Levy didn't have a whole lot to do in this series. More so, I really liked her, and one of my favorite episodes of this was actually Past Perfect. And that is where the professor Gordon and his wife Lilith take over Lacey's old house and turn it into a bed and breakfast. But they find all of Lacey's paintings, Gordon Lacey's paintings of the kid, and put them all up because they're creepy and they're trying to make a murder house. And so, you have to wonder what becomes of them. Is that because they were surrounded by so much of the kid? Or is it just the town itself? We had already seen that the professor, even before he moved to Castle Rock, had a bit of a temper.
A little bit of a temper, and of course we know that his wife had an affair. So
yes, with a colleague.
Yes. So seeing what happened it was. I'm sorry, it was funny when their very first booking showed up, and bed and breakfast. You're hosted. You eat dinner with the family that lives there or whatever. They're like, oh, so how long have you been married? And one of them was 2 years, the other one was 13. And I was like, oh, that's funny, because that is something that has home for them already, and I am not surprised that it takes the turn that it does.
Yeah, but we get to see in that episode, we get to see Jackie Torrance's love of all things macabre, and she knows the history that they're trying to build upon, and she's had a notion for a similar idea. She even tells them that they used the wrong sort of axe hanging out of that dummy's head.
That's not something you want to see in a living room.
Yeah, really not. But the couple being there for a getaway tryst, yes, is just enough to push Gordon over the edge, and he brutally murders them. And then they leave us in this moment at a commercial break where it looks like he may turn on his wife, and then we find out that Lilith actually is helping him cover this thing up. She's helping clean everything up,
and it never happened.
And and then so when we go to the we get later deeper into the episode where by this point Jackie's visited and she's got a little question mark, like she's seen enough and she found blood on something. She's got the notion that not everything is kosher there, and she comes back at the end, thankfully with proper timing, and ends up saving Henry's life. But the part of that episode where Henry is sneaking around in their house and seeing those pictures of the kid, and that was somebody had commented on one of the articles or one of the videos or something that I saw that they felt like that episode did nothing. It didn't further the story in any way. And I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. First of all, we get deeper context of Castle Rock and the badness that's always happened there, and then we get this notion that we get our Henry, seeing those pictures, those paintings of the kid, and seeing how far back they go and how far back they're dated and how he hasn't changed in all of that time. And then lastly, he sees something of him in the sweater that he was wearing when he disappeared, which says that Lacey somehow understood there was a connection between those two, which I think is why he told him to ask for Henry. So yes, you're right. He was giving them his name when he was asked his name, but Lacey had also told him to ask for Henry Matthew Deaver because he knew that they were connected. So all of those things to me made that an important episode. And then when he gets found out and is trying to leave there and Lilith stabs him, I just thought, oh no, because that's the thing with the Stephen King story.
You never know.
He could have died in that episode.
We don't know.
And the last two episodes could have been something completely different to close things off, or it could have focused on Molly or the kid. When he got stabbed, I was like, uh-oh, what's going to happen? Yeah. And that whole thing of accidental stabs and her accidentally puncturing herself in the neck when he tries to get away from her. All of that stuff was funny and macabre all at the same time. All at the same
time. I was like,
Yeah. Oh. Because she slashed her husband first, in the rib or something.
And then like it bounced back and just got her.
Yeah, and then when Henry was trying to bat her away, he knocked it into her neck.
Yeah, so it just got her.
Yeah, and then she just went down. So, but that shot of Henry running down the stairs with the guy running behind him was so intense for me because you could see them both in frame. You knew that there wasn't much time. And I was just like, why would Henry have his window down? Why would you be driving around in Castle Rock with your window down?
Maybe your air conditioning doesn't work.
Yeah, but that whole thing and him getting drug out of the car, and you thought, well, Henry seemed to be a goner until Jackie showed up and in very The Shining fashion uses an axe to dispatch Gordon.
And he became his own little dummy.
He did.
He did. He looked just like the dummy that he made. Yeah. But it was with the proper axe.
And we see with the little coda there at the end of the finale that Jackie's going to use that experience to write a book, and that she may be returning to the Overlook Hotel because.
So let's talk about speculation with that little teaser.
Yeah, for season 2.
Are we going to get a season 2 where we follow her, even so not necessarily seeing the same characters as we saw before? We follow her to the Overlook Hotel and see if there's anything new and interesting happening there. So kind of tagging on to another playground of Stephen King's, that would be awesome.
I tell you what I like, and this is, I'm not a showrunner, so I don't have any authority, unfortunately.
But just call us and we'll tell them what.
But here's what I would do, because obviously, so I think the reason that we saw they did the 1 year jump in the finale. So we saw that he has had the kid locked up for a year. We also saw that Ruth has passed in that time, maybe because she didn't stay in the loop.
Yeah.
if you want to think of it that way.
Yeah.
But then, what I think would be interesting. So clearly, what I was going to say is clearly, they Ruth is gone, Alan's gone. So some big name celebrities that will not be a part of a cast for season 2.
Right.
I think that's great though that you could get people like that on board for the first season of something, and then you can continue building to the cast and bringing people in into upcoming seasons. But what I would like to see would be if you kept the setting in Castle Rock. So while I like the notion of following Jackie. Jackie was one of my favorite characters, but following her to the Overlook Hotel would mean that we would move away from Castle Rock and its citizens. I would like it if they would take Castle Rock, the town, not even go back in time or go forward in time or whatever, but just rotate our viewpoint and give us a new character to be a follow-through character. So while all the events of season 1 are happening around them, that they have another story. That they have another thing. That while awesome. The bad things are happening, they have their own bad stuff happening because they're in Castle Rock and their bad stuff is befalling them too. And their story through that would be interesting because then we still get to see like Henry or
just kind of in the background though.
Yeah, or even Ruth or something, in a moment where they could just pull them in as like a guest star or whatever, but we'd still feel like we understand that place and all the people that we cared about in the first season are still there and stuff is still happening. We could see the kid, we could see, and see just the same events, but just rotate our viewpoint around a little bit.
Yeah, that would
put the camera on somebody else's shoulder and let's follow them through their mess. That would be
interesting too.
That would be my preference, but I would not hate it if we followed her to the Overlook. Sorry, yes, Overlooked was the name of her.
Which I thought was fun. And of course, somebody looking over her shoulder, which of course is a little bit of an overlook, not understanding that.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, so getting back to this season 1, or at least this series.
And we will wrap this up, we promise.
Yeah, we're getting there. But I really enjoyed it. I love that they took the time to build these characters. They took the time for us to understand them, who they were, or who they wanted us to see that they were.
Right.
And really, I mean, yes, subtle, but so well done all the way through acting, performances, directing, just the setting, everything that made this place a real place where you could imagine all of these happening.
You said directing. I just want to point something out. The last 3 episodes, which in my opinion were 3 of the best episodes of the season, they were all great, but those last 3 were especially strong. All 3 of those directed by female directors.
Oh.
And I thought that was pretty cool that a show would do that for, it's one thing, like I know Jessica Jones season 2 had all female directors,
which is very cool.
Which is very cool, but I think that that's one thing, because that's like, this is a female story, so we're going to hand this over to female directors. I think that's an easier step to make. So I'm less tempted to pat people on the back for that. There shouldn't be a reason not to look at a female director for anything.
Right.
So I love that this show, which was not female heavy, it was not female centric in any way. We had good, strong female characters in Molly and Ruth and Jackie, but it wasn't, they weren't the forward motion of this series.
Right.
But that they still thought to just pick the best director for those episodes and stick them in there. That it wasn't a big, hey, look, and it wasn't an announcement.
No.
Hey, look, we've got 3 female directors that are directing our last 3 episodes. It didn't need to be, which says that they're handling that the right way. They're just looking for the best director for the job each time, and they got the best 3 for those last 3 episodes, and those were great episodes.
They were phenomenal episodes, and so, but what I really enjoyed is that throughout the series, they left it, they presented the information to you and then said, what do you think? And it's giving you room and pause to analyze and think about what you really want to believe happened in this series. And I love that so much. And I really, I'm disappointed that there are people who are like, oh, I don't get it. Because I feel like for them, they didn't understand it, and so they might not have spent their time wisely watching the series, but also just like,
or that they wanted something spoon fed to them, or they wanted a definitive answer, and I think
you're not going to get that with this sort of thing. And I'm very impressed that they put it out there like that. So I felt it was. Really
I would always rather a director or a showrunner or whatever treat me with the respect of, you're smart enough to put this together and have your own thoughts and form your own opinion, and that's why I tend to like a movie, you know, when I'm looking at horror movies, to look at a movie like Hereditary over a movie like The Nun. I enjoyed The Nun, and my non-spoiler review is up for that if you want to check that out. But one is a very standard, we're going to walk you through and explain to you how we got to this place. The other is very much a, here's elements, and here's the story that we're trying to tell. You decide where you fall. You decide what you know. Did you get it? Did you not get it?
What do you believe?
What do you believe
What do you
about
think?
this? Yeah. And I feel like, to me, that's the experience that I'm going for. That may not be the case for you. But our question for you is, what did you think about Castle Rock? If you watch this, clearly you watch Castle Rock. You have some thoughts. You have some opinions. Jump down in the comments below and let us know. No doubt, even though this has been a longer video for us, no doubt we missed things. We didn't discuss. Not only could we have missed things as we were watching it, but there may have been things that we caught that we forgot to talk about here. This happens all the time. We don't write notes for these things. We just kind of do our thing and invite you along. So anyway, if you want to talk about something that we failed to bring up in this spoiler discussion,
hit those comments.
Hit the comments. Let us know, because we'll happily talk with you down there. And be sure, if you like this video and you know people that enjoyed Castle Rock or have some other interesting theories about Castle Rock, share this video with them via Facebook or Twitter or wherever you share your videos, so that they can check this out too and become part of the discussion. We always appreciate it when you hit that thumbs up. That helps. And if you're not subscribed, please consider doing that. That helps us keep doing what we love to do here for you. We do have some other fun things coming up.
Yeah.
We're not going to tell you what those are, though. No. But we will be back with some more videos of some different things, and probably some movie reviews coming up, and some more trailer reactions and that sort of thing. Yeah, until next time, folks.
Bye.
Bye.